windows are okay. Oh yeah. Oh, the band joists need some sealing. He's like, oh, this house isn't terrible. I wouldn't recommend anything else. And I was like, well, they told me on the phone you were going to do a blower door test. He's like, yeah, we don't need to do that. You know, your house isn't that bad. And
how would you know?
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, our regular discussion on building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is Senior Editor Patrick McCoe. Today I'm joined by Colin Russell, Fine Homebuilding Video Producer, Matt Milham, Fine Homebuilding Deputy Editor.
What's up?
And Fine Homebuilding Producer Jeff Rose.
Hi.
Please email your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And remember, if we read your email on the air, I'll send you a FHB podcast sticker. You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Well, it's great to see you guys.
Good to see you too.
Yeah, it's good to see everybody.
How are things?
Fantastic. The weather's nice. Got all the windows open.
I was going to say this is the time to live in New England, but you don't. But it's close enough, right? And this is the absolute best time of the year, I'd say.
Yeah. I mean, I live in a state that's actually named after, an English city, but
it's what, 40 miles away and it's not New England anymore?
Yeah, I think I'm 11 miles from Connecticut.
Carol got up at 5 this morning to go to Pleasant Valley, New York. Isn't that very close to you?
Yeah, that's pretty close.
Yeah, so she had a photo shoot. So we all have, at the various Taunton brands, our challenges with photo shoots, and hers is perhaps the worst, is you have to get up in the middle of the night because they have to take pictures of flowers at daybreak or at dusk. And so that means in the summertime, at the height of the growing season, you might be working for 14 hours.
Mm-hmm.
But then during the middle of the day, you get to come home or go to the hotel and take a nap.
Yeah.
Jeff, was that you welding?
Yeah, doing a little bit of welding.
What are you welding? This is amazing.
Well, it was mostly for fun, but I'm trying to come up with a way that I can use the lawn tractor to move the generator around, because where I hook it up is in the backyard, which is down either a really steep bank or all the way around the house and up a slightly less steep bank.
So you're making a cart to move this heavy thing around?
Yeah, well, just basically like a receiver hitch. So I can just attach it to, throw a bar in there and attach it to the hitch on the lawn tractor.
And is this the first time you've used your welder, or have you used this before?
I've played with it a little bit, but this is the first time I've actually tried to produce something useful.
How cool is that? Wow. Awesome. Well, you're going to have to keep us posted on that.
Yeah. Yeah. It worked out okay. I need to go back to the drawing table because it's tough to mount anything to that because there's no room, and without completely disassembling it, which is not something I'm prepared to do. The generator, that is.
Yeah.
No, I think you should take that all apart to make it fit on this new cart.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Clearly you need to get Rob Watzak involved in this caper.
Well, that's why I knew Rob wasn't going to be on this episode, so that's why I decided it was safe to bring it up.
We don't know enough to critique it.
Colin, what have you been doing?
Well, actually, I got some help on my property. I've integrated my front yard and driveway into one uniform gravel surface. So you may recall, Matt, you actually did an article a ways back with Fabiano.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So him and his guys came over and by hand, dug up my front yard and driveway. It wraps, it's like a U shape, so it goes around the sides of my house a little bit. And now I have gravel, which is great for removing water from my property. I live near the beach, and it just looks clean and it's simple. And I'm not looking forward to fighting the weeds when they decide to come up.
Cool.
You need one of those big torches, man.
I'm going to get one. Going to have a power washer, a torch, all types of things.
What'd you use for edging on that?
Belgian black.
Okay.
Yeah, so they right along the road, it's about 1.25 inches higher than the asphalt, and so that's 45 feet long. And then there's returns on either side of the property. And one's about 15 feet, and one's about 4 feet.
Cool.
What was the motivation for this, Colin?
Well, my front yard has been a wreck for many, many years. Originally, it was a large seagrass garden, but just the weeds and the maintenance, it was just a lot of time. Something we don't, we also wanted off-street parking, more of it. So, you can pull up anywhere on our front yard.
Has it made your house hotter? Like, we have tons of gravel all over the place, and it's hot, right? It gets warmed up, and it's somewhat reflective. Has that been a problem?
Not that I've noticed so far. It has been extremely hot, as you know. So the house has just been like we've had the AC on up until this morning.
Yeah,
So,
me too.
But we had a gravel driveway. It's just now it's extended around the whole lot. So it's more just that it's not dirty and buggy and gross, and it just looks beachy and clean and simple. Which is
Cool.
perfect for this neighborhood.
Yeah.
Can you put some pictures up on the podcast page so folks can look at that?
I certainly can.
That'd be great. What have you been doing, Matt?
Not a whole lot other than I've become obsessed with my compost. I've split up my compost, so I've got like one that's going to be, like used to actually, in the garden to make the soil better, and one that's just like a junk pile. But yeah, I had taken an advanced composting class, early in this whole thing, I guess, like early in the spring, I think. And, had gotten a bunch of tips there, and they were like, oh, you'll never get to the temperatures of like commercial compost. And, last week I had it got up to a little over 160 degrees Fahrenheit, and I had to like douse it with water basically to keep it from running away on me and possibly starting a fire.
Well, being married to a gardener, I know a little bit about compost. So I know that you've been working hard to get those kind of temperatures. That means you're turning it all the time. You're probably adding water.
Yeah, every week turning it, every week, just dumping tons of water on it as I'm turning it. So, yeah. But it's a good
that is an obsession.
Yeah, it's a good mix now of, for a long time it was just leaves, and that wasn't really doing a whole lot, but I started mixing in grass, and then it really took off.
Yeah, so if you can get the green stuff in with the brown stuff, boy, it really cooks, right?
Yeah, because the green stuff that I was adding from the garden just wasn't enough. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
So you obviously have a bagger for your mower, or are you raking up the clippings?
Yeah, we bought a new mower, I don't know, in April maybe, and yeah, got a bagger and just started collecting the clippings from that. Most of the time we just have it set on mulch. That's supposed to be good for the lawn for at least part of the year, and now we're in a part where there's just enough grass growing. So, but there's enough to put on the compost.
On the garden.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, eventually it'll go on the garden.
You haven't put any down yet. It's not ready.
No, I mean the stuff, the leaves. I mean, it was a pile. This compost bin that I made is about 4 feet by 4 feet by 8 feet, and that was overfull with leaves last year in the fall, and that had shrunk down to less than a quarter of the size of that, but it still was not quite compost. The leaves are still pretty intact. There's a lot of worms and stuff in there, but the temperatures never really got crazy. And then adding this grass in now, I mean, it just smells like cow farts. So it's going great.
So I want to love compost. I understand it, but I just think it's kind of gross and smells bad. That's just where I come down on it.
Yeah, well, fortunately, it's far enough away from the house. It's right next to the garden, and far enough away from the house that nothing blows in.
Good for you, though. That's awesome. That is probably the best food for your garden.
Yeah. Well, it'll save us the $20 per truckload that we were paying to buy it. I mean, it's not really worth all the effort when it costs that little.
That's the other point I've come down on compost, is that it's really easy to buy it all done.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, Carol buys a few yards every year and puts it on the garden and the perennial beds, and I don't know, it's cheap. I want to say it's like $20 or $30 a yard delivered.
Yeah, it's hardly worth the effort of doing it yourself, especially for the volume you end up with, but it's cheap entertainment.
Yeah. What else are you going to do right now?
Yeah. It's not like I got a lot going on.
How do you feel about compost, Colin? I bet you're a huge fan.
Technically I am certainly, but I never touched this stuff.
Well,
Um,
I had a momentous day yesterday. I don't mind saying it. So we made one of the probably top 10 biggest purchases of our married life, and it's behind me here. Can you guys see that?
is that a
Yeah.
generator?
Yeah, that's my new Yamaha generator that was delivered at 6 o'clock last night, and I was putting it together at 8 a.m. 8 p.m.
What's it run on?
It's gas.
Okay.
I picked this. I don't know. People on the podcast are probably tired of me talking about it, but I picked this over like a Harbor Freight or a Tractor Supply or one of those kind of big box varieties because it's got a big honking muffler on it. It's meant to be used every day by construction crews who are not going to pay too much attention about taking care of it or treating it nice. And I don't know. It's beautiful. It matches the Fine Homebuilding logo. I also thought was key to the selection. But it's a nice machine. I bought it on Amazon, and I had a couple things to share about that experience. The great thing about buying a generator on Amazon is you don't need to go to the store. It comes right to your house on a liftgate truck. The downside of the Amazon purchase is your Yamaha dealer would put the thing all together. They would fill it with oil, so it doesn't come with oil, and Amazon doesn't tell you need to buy it. So that's kind of a downside, but the convenience of it was hard to beat. And it still has a 3-year warranty and flat-free tires, which is something that's, a little out of the ordinary, I guess.
Hey, Patrick, did you get it as a backup for the house, or is this really a construction unit?
So that's an excellent question, Colin. I bought it as a backup for the house, but this thing is made to go to construction sites every day.
Cool.
And when you ask a bunch of people on the internet or social media what kind of generator you should buy, should I buy the Harbor Freight one for $400 or should I spend $2,000 on this Yamaha? Of course, you hear all different answers, and what I can say is this thing, compared to other generators I've seen, is built like a tank. It's got better components on it. It's meant to run more fuel efficiently, and the muffler, I swear to God, is 3 times the size of the ones that you see at the home center.
So is it nice and quiet? Have you run it?
It doesn't have oil in it, dude.
Oh, you still don't have one. So you don't even know.
Maybe it's a big loud muffler.
Yeah. Do they recommend the ethanol-free gas for that, or?
No, there's no. It just says you can't run it beyond a certain point, right? What is that? 85.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Octane. Yeah.
So here's a question for listeners. They tell you to put Yamaha's brand of 1040 motor oil in the crankcase. They also say normal 1040 is fine. Does it matter? Should I go to the trouble of ordering Yamaha oil that'll take 3 or 4 days, just put the normal stuff in it? Colin, you're shaking your head no.
Yeah, I mean, oil is oil. I mean, they don't have like a patent on some special oil blend, right? I mean, I could see if they're saying for warranty use ours, but I would say that's a gimmick just to get you to buy their stuff.
Yeah.
So you have more small engines than most people I know. You have ATVs and a snow machine. What do you put the brand of oil respective to the brand of machinery?
Oh God, no. Yeah. It's funny. The first few years owning those machines, especially the ATVs, I was so careful about, doing everything. These machines are built to take a beating and last forever. I've really, not that I don't change the oil on occasion, but I find that stuff just works pretty good.
What brand are they calling?
Polaris, mainly. Yeah. But I have everything, all the usual suspects too, the weed whacker, the chainsaw. I mean, Matt, do you ever buy the name brand? I can't imagine.
Every once in a while, if I'm in the store and I just happen to be like, oh yeah, I need oil, I'll buy whatever. Like I'm trying to think. I think I've got a Briggs and Stratton maybe on my snowblower. I've got a Honda on my pressure washer. I don't know what's on. I've got a Generac generator. I don't remember what engine that has. But I mean, for a lot of that stuff, yeah, I just buy the right weight and viscosity oil, and I don't really care about the brand as long as it's the right stuff. The main thing I do is I generally do synthetic for everything and then just stay synthetic rather than mixing up, regular oil and synthetic oil.
That's another question I had. I would love to have a small engine person on the Pro Talk podcast. This fostered all kinds of questions for me. So if anyone out there knows a good small engine mechanic, it would be awesome for you to put me in touch with them, and we'll have them on Pro Talk, because all of us who build stuff have these things around, and I don't think any of us really know what the right answer is, but somebody who works on them every day can tell us if it matters if you use Yamaha 1040 versus some other brand. Jeff, what would you do?
I use whatever brand. Well, not the cheapest brands, but any of the national brands.
Mm-hmm. So I put Amazon oil in my cars. So there you go.
And there's his special.
I usually just get whatever synthetic is at CarQuest that's the right type for whatever I need, and I just buy it in the 5-quart, things, and then I don't need to buy it as often. One
of the downsides of buying the Yamaha oil is I can only find it in a gallon, so it's like $25, and I only need a quart, and then I got to store this stuff. How often am I going to change it?
Once you get it running, if we have another power outage, you're going to change the oil a couple of times throughout, a 5-day outage.
Oh, good.
Yeah, that's the thing. You do need to change the oil, and actually, I think right after I got my generator was actually the time when I was working on that article with Fabiano, the guy you talked about, Colin. Yeah. And John, the contractor, J&J Builders, was the one who was like, yeah, just make sure you change the oil all the time. He's like, I change it every day when I'm using it. And he beats the hell out of his generator, and he'd had it for, I don't remember how many years, 15 years or something like that. And
was it a Honda?
No, I think it was, I don't remember what type it was, but I just remember having this conversation with him, and he was like, just change the oil all the time. It'll last forever. So that's generally the advice I've taken, and it's been fine so far.
Maybe I just better get the gallon, huh?
Yeah. That's why I just buy the 5-quart thing, and that way you don't have a worry.
So what is how many hours before you have to change it?
I don't know. You got to look at the manual, but it's not a lot.
Yeah, mine calls for 100 hours.
That's what I figured. And I was doing the math. I was like, that's days. But yeah, if we have a prolonged outage, right?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Should we get to some feedback here? This is from Dyami, our friend at Roof Services. I was listening to the July 10th episode, which ended with a brief discussion of tapes and sealants and how they would likely be the routine point of failure as modern houses aged. Well, I'll be the first to admit that modern tape and sealants is one of the biggest changes in construction. I am of two minds regarding their lifespan. Regarding most sealants, I believe they will fail. This has been proven to us with time and in the field, and we've used a variety of sealants. Well, there are a few which have been proven, but most, I've seen a few perform for over 20 years, most fail within a matter of months. Regarding tape, my experience has been the exact opposite. Almost every tape product we have seems to last longer. In the mid-90s, typical sealant was replaced with seam tape. I could tell the age of a roof simply by looking at the condition of the sealant on the seams, and the sealant never lasted beyond 10 to 15 years. I don't know how long the tape will last because the tape switch where we started in the mid-90s are still performing as they were designed to and have yet to fail because of age. 25 years is not what we're aiming for to task with houses, but it is in flat roofing, subject to the extreme temperature delta T's and snow and ice that most building components don't have. Roofs are also exposed to dramatically more UV than most building components. These roofing tapes last so long and perform so well, I'm relatively confident that a similar product that is protected from thermal shock and UV exposure and most direct moisture will last as long as it intended to. Please keep up the great discussion. Dyami Plotke, Roof Surfaces. What do you guys think? Is that a fair comparison? Roof sealing tapes to weather sealing tapes?
I don't know much about roof sealing tapes. I mean, what are we talking about there?
So where pieces of these roof membranes are put together, they use a tape on the seams, and they come in a roll. They have release paper, and you peel it off, and you roll the seam with a roller. And he's saying these last a lot longer than the liquid products they used to use.
I believe it. I mean, a lot of these, new pressure sensitive adhesive acrylic tapes, seem to bond a lot, seem to bond really well. And I mean, some of the testing that like Peter Yost has done, the backyard kind of testing,
And Martin.
and Martin, yeah, I mean, they seem to really hold up. I mean, Peter at least tried to test them in sort of, like real world type conditions, and some of them held on. I I don't know if the zip tape. I don't know if it ever failed in their test. I'd have to go back and look at that, but I know it lasted a very like years.
Yeah, and these accelerated testing, they leave them exposed. And Dyami's point is that ordinarily they're protected by other layers of building stuff.
Right.
So you're not getting the harsh environment that, like, for example, a roof tape would, or the backyard testing of tapes, right?
Right. And I think they were like basically hanging it on a surface like that and dangling weight off of it.
They
So,
made it as hard as it could possibly be.
right. Yeah. And they were, they installed it, according to manufacturer's recommendations, but then they were wetting and doing all kinds of other things. So it was, yeah. And a lot of them held up. Some of them, failed during a lot of, well, actually pretty much everything failed during the test. It was like how long it took for it to fail. But I mean, they were putting it through its paces more extremes than it would probably ever be actually on a house.
Colin, did you use a bunch of tape when you rebuilt your sister's siding?
Oh goodness, yes.
Just grace the whole thing.
well, well, I did put up zip, right? So I was taping right off
Yeah.
the bat. But I mean, I was taping the door and window casings, the trims, like everything was taped. I actually used some liquid flash as well. Um, but
Is that a really harsh exposure, or you just didn't want to have to ever do this again?
yeah, I was just in there, and this is like what was in my shed. Um, and it's like I get to play with all the things I've learned, right?
Yeah.
So I tend to do, if I'm just doing one or two, one door and one window, it's like I'm going to play and like really go at it and see how good of a job I can do, and shingle style everything in. And but I am a big fan of tapes. Like I think I will be curious to see in 50 years what these buildings look like when we open them up. But I mean, so far, I think things are working pretty well, especially with the tapes.
If I'm here in 50 years, that would be remarkable.
Oh, yeah. Well, listen, I mean, this is a little off subject, but when you buy a brand new window, aren't they like, yeah, this window will perform for 30 years? And I'm thinking, in 30 years, then what are we supposed to do?
Yeah.
Like, change the windows? I mean,
Right. So in New England, we talk of, windows lasting 100 years, right? And two in some cases. But most windows in even the oldest houses, most windows in the oldest houses in New England have had to be replaced, right? And they're still old, but they're not original to the structure.
yeah.
Jeff, what did you do with your, the wall you rebuilt on the back of your house? Did you tape all the, flashing and
Yeah, well, again,
fenestration?
yeah, I mean, like Colin, it's like I put up zip system, so I taped those seams and taped the window openings, taped the Tyvek, that came down from above, and
Well, Brian was saying in that episode that this is all a grand experiment, so you all can report into us too. I guess the earliest tape stuff has probably been out there for 20 years, so my guess is that remodeling is going to reveal either success or failures with the products that went on first. This comes from I don't know. In podcast 275, Making Do Without PT, Wasting Paint and Staging High Work, you discussed alternatives to PT, including using wood preservatives, painting, and using rot-resistant species of wood. I've had excellent results using Doug fir that I soaked with Penetreat, a borate product that has very low toxicity to humans and very high toxicity for wood-boring insects and fungi. To keep the borate from diffusing out of the wood, use an exterior stain over the Douglas fir. I've built a run for chickens that looked as good as new until the recent storm in the Northeast that uprooted a tree absolutely crushed our chicken coop and run. So unfortunately, the borate treatment does not prevent preserve structures from falling trees. As suggested in the podcast, I would still look to get the shed up off the ground for best results. Well, I think that is fantastic advice. I'd never heard of Penetreat, but it makes sense, right? Borate
Yeah.
preservatives are good at keeping pests away. The problem is that they're water soluble, so they need to be reapplied. But that if your shed was reasonably off the ground, that wouldn't be too hard to spray it on there again, right?
Yeah. Big overhangs prevent water from hitting it.
This is interesting feedback. This comes from Dr. Adam, MD. Good afternoon. I've been listening to your podcast for quite a while now, and it's not only excellent in its current iteration, but it keeps getting better. I don't know when he started listening to it. I thoroughly enjoy it and thank all of you for the hard work you put into it. To follow up on the occasional discussion you have about safety every once in a while and the excellent article about lines and safety on roofs, I can say it's incredibly important. I've worked in the ER for 10 years now. I can say the workplace-related injuries show up frequently. It has ended the career of many people that I've seen and rarely seen a fatality due to work-related injuries. So he's saying that it's not going to kill you, but it's going to ruin your career and make you crippled for the rest of your life, right?
Well, I don't think dead people are showing up in the ER either.
Well, that's true. True. The sheer volume of fingers I've seen missing from table saws is staggering. On that note, snowblowers are also great at taking off fingers quickly. Please wear goggles, gloves, and get a saw stop, harnesses, and keep your head up and know your surroundings. This doesn't have to be a short career, and there's good safety devices available to protect you on the job site. Keep safe out there and keep up the great podcasts, Adam. Well, that was cool. You guys know I interviewed an ER doc for the Pro Talk podcast.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
He's going to be on, what is it, today or tomorrow, right, Jeff?
I think today. Yeah. Which
so that was
2 weeks
Dr.
ago.
Art. Yeah, right. Dr. Art Henderson. If you folks are listening to this podcast now and haven't heard that, it is worth a listen. He was a hoot. Oh my goodness, we need to get to a question here, right?
Yeah.
Holy cow. It's interesting to hear the conversation about venting with regard to ice damming and moisture control. I've lived most of my life in Texas where ice damming is never a problem. That white stuff falling in the sky was always confusing on the rare occasion that it came. What's this stuff, manna from heaven? No, in Texas, roof venting is to get rid of the heat. Imagine having the attic cavity at 140 or more when trying to maintain the inside temperatures below 80 with refrigeration. A number of years ago, I reclaimed a largish attic space to build an upstairs office in a house in San Antonio. The house was built around 1990, so had reasonably recent construction. Since it was summer, I put a sprinkler hose on the roof and turned on the water at a rate that it would just barely drip off the eaves, turning the roof into a giant swamp cooler. The evaporation lowered the temperature to 95 degrees instead of 100. I used 1/8 inch masonite cut slightly wider than the rafter bays and then bowed them in between them to create an air passage from the knee wall to above the collar ties that formed the ceiling. I then put fiberglass insulation between the masonite and the drywall. It doesn't matter if the venting assembly was airtight, as the whole purpose was to provide an air channel that would use the convective chimney effect to drive air through the channel and carry most of the heat away. Insulation doesn't stop the heat, it only slows it down. Carrying the heat away is a better solution. It worked too. After the room was complete, I could easily feel the difference between the normal bays and the ones close to the end where I couldn't get in the masonite channel. i.e., the air channel was cool and the insulation only was warm. This technique, of course, works best on roofs with greater pitches, although it would help some even with lower roof pitches. If I was doing the same today, I'd use 1-inch rigid foam instead of masonite, and I'd probably spray foam the edges before installing the fiberglass insulation. Big box stores and lumber yards also have purpose-made channels that can be stapled to the underside of the roof sheathing. What do you think, Matt? Is this science or is this bogus?
This has been studied a bit, and that's kind of bogus. So, especially there's a couple things going on. One, venting a roof, you're not really trying to dissipate heat. You're more trying to dissipate moisture that's getting up into that attic assembly or into the cathedral ceiling. As far as like lowering temperature, the studies have really shown on both types that there's not really a measurable effect of venting. With like a regular open attic, down at the bottom of the roof, there may be a little bit of cooling down close to the soffit vents, but there's essentially no effect once it goes up higher in the, up the roof. And then in a cathedral assembly, they do find you get a little bit better cooling at the bottom, but by the time it gets to the top, it's even hotter than it would be in an open attic assembly because you don't have any air mixing or anything there. So unless you had a really high roof pitch and were able to get the collar ties, down far enough that like the top third of the roof were not really, you know, opposite your conditioned space, I don't really see how you would get really much of a temperature effect there. Any gain you got from the cooling at the bottom would be lost by the time it got to the top, where it's even hotter than it would have been, if it were just an open attic.
It's weird. So people in Texas say this a lot. There's an architecture firm, Pfeiffer, and he says that this works in their climate, and he actually uses a lot of galvalume metal roofing, and they actually put battens under that, and they're arranged so that the heated air can escape, under the ridge cap, and this. As Matt suggests, the studies I've seen have said this is not the case, that roof color matters much more than the venting or other things that you can do to lower the temperature. But I hate to argue with people's experience because I don't live in Texas. We vent roofs, as he points out, for different reasons. Yeah. Colin, does this smell bad to you, or does it smell good to you?
Well, Matt was so darn scientific that I just feel foolish even speaking. But I mean, it's almost like, to your point though, Matt, where it's to remove the moisture, not the heat, regardless of what we're calling it, he needs to remove it, right? He may think he's doing it for heat, but what he's actually doing is getting rid of the moisture, which may be being created by the heat, right? Because you're creating a dew point or something. So I don't know. I think venting is good unless you're not venting. And if you're not venting, you better know what you're doing, because venting may be wasteful, but I think it solves a lot of problems for those of us who make
forgiving
things and don't know what we're doing.
Yeah, it's a forgiving roof.
Yeah, it's forgiving. Yes.
Yeah, and I suspect where he is seeing warmer temperatures where he doesn't have those baffles, it may be just as a result of direct
the wall.
Yeah, well, and conduction. I mean, like you have the heat conducting directly from the roof through the insulation into the wall, where he's got an air gap in other places, and so you basically create a thermal break there that really helps a lot. It's essentially an air film. So
Bill Rose is always telling research to study corners. Weird things happen at building corners, including a lot of thermal bridging, right? So if you have a roof transitioning to a wall in your attic, it's going to be hot there because there's tons of wood.
Yep.
And if you have an overhang in Texas, that's getting baked on all day and from all sides. So that's going to move from more to less, outside to inside, and you're on the inside.
Yep.
Oh, good question, though. Hey, folks in Texas, tell us we're wrong. Let's hear it. This comes from Carson. I guess we answered another Carson's question. I have a follow-up question pertaining to my build. There was a lot of discussion about the impact of the pandemic on construction. However, locally and from what I've read nationally, it seems that subcontractors are getting harder than ever to get a hold of, while lumber costs and shortages of material continue to increase. Do you feel that this is simply from the resumption of stalled projects or something more permanent? Is this just the worst time possible I could have ended up with to start building a house? Sorry to hear Justin is leaving. Keep up the great content. I think there will always be a demand for professionally edited and reviewed content in a field where mistakes can cost you thousands in whatever medium that inhabits. Thanks, Carson. Well, thanks, Carson.
So
someone go.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's just resumption of paused projects. There's also, at least around me, I mean, I can speak anecdotally. I have a couple friends that are in the real estate business around here. I'm about 90 miles north of New York City, and they are busier than they ever have been. There are people either moving out of the city or building second homes outside of the city. Like the one thing that's really happened in the pandemic is a lot of people are working from home, and a lot of businesses, including Taunton, are realizing you don't really need to be in the office to do your job. Like that's just the case with a lot of, I guess, white collar jobs. And so those people may never end up going back to the office again. And if they don't ever have to go back to the office again, why would you live in an expensive city paying, $5,000 a month in rent when you can get a bigger house in a place that's much cheaper to live and pay $3,000 a month in a mortgage?
And you can go outside.
And you can go outside. You've got big open spaces. You can go to the grocery store. There's no traffic.
And you can remodel.
Yeah, so there are just tons of people building and buying up existing homes in places outside of these urban areas, and probably even farther out. If a lot of these jobs you can literally do from anywhere in the world. You don't even need to stay in the U.S. I mean, move to Costa Rica.
Yeah. Colin, what do you think?
Well, I think that there's a lot of factors why you can't get a hold of subs. I mean, one thing I've seen anecdotally is that small companies where you rely on one or two like apprentice types, when the pandemic hit, they went on unemployment and were making more money.
Mm-hmm.
So all of a sudden, people didn't necessarily have their helpers, the helper level. So they had to take on more work themselves. I mean, this is just a couple of cases, but there's a lot going on right now. But absolutely, I mean, all the houses in my neighborhood, I'm on the New Haven line, right, that goes to Manhattan. So all along the New Haven train line, houses are just going like hotcakes. And there's just a ton of work going. Everybody's remodeling, moving in. House across the street from me, a new deck, new fence, driveways. Like everybody's doing something. It's very busy out there right now.
Jeff, you got thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think it's everybody's at home and they're looking around and seeing what needs to get done. And if they're not doing it themselves, they're hiring somebody to do it or trying to.
I've been studying this issue, as you would expect. And the lumber companies, the sawyers, they say that early part of the pandemic meant that they couldn't get logs. And so they shut down. And we're seeing the effects of that now, whereas there's ordinarily X amount of lumber and panel products made for the country. And the people who make these things, these are commodities. They don't want to overproduce them because they end up losing money on them, right? So they're very sensitive to economic forces, and they slow up and speed up production based on what they think demand will be. So that happened first. And then, as Matt was just talking about, folks started working from home and they started being around home a lot more. And they suddenly weren't spending tons of money commuting, buying gas, maintaining their vehicles. Going into New York City, for example, you might spend $100 a day in parking. So you have this extra cash, and now you're home all the time, and you can make it better. And that has driven demand. And Andy Engel, who works for many of the people that Matt was talking about, who have second homes in Roxbury and the surrounding area, he says they are so busy. He gets so many calls of people wanting to improve their now primary residence. And of course, those people have lots of money, so of course subcontractors are going to go work on those projects where they're sure to get paid. The finishes are going to be more expensive, so the contracts are higher. And I think if you're a normal person trying to get work done, this would be the absolute worst time.
Yeah.
State
Get
of
a time
affairs.
machine. Go get it
What's
done.
that?
Go get a time machine. Go back before the pandemic. Get your house built.
Yeah, buy a bunch of pressure treated lumber.
Yeah. Yeah, and then make bank.
So you guys know that I worked in the lumber business for a while, and it was very much a futures game. The lumberyard owners, they also make these same kind of guesses on what demand is going to be. And you buy cheap, sell high is the way you make money in these industries that sell commodities. And I've never seen anything like this. It's really super weird. Somebody was saying in the Midwest they were quoted $6 for an 8-foot 2x4.
Yeah.
Whereas in February that was probably $2, right?
Yeah.
Three times as much in 6 months.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you also had, price pressure before that from all the trade war stuff that was going on,
Yep.
between the US and Canada. So, I mean, and that probably hasn't really abated. It may be difficult to say how much of this is due to, mill shutdowns and how much is just trade pressure.
As to the question, will this continue? My guess is for the short term until we get a cure for the coronavirus. Because, like Matt said, there's people who are going to be continuing to work from home or be there a lot more because they have no other recreational opportunities. So they're going to spend money on their house to make their life at home more livable.
Yeah.
It's weird. Who would have guessed that the change from suburban to urban influx would reverse so quickly in a matter of weeks?
It's really amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
They're filling up my Frisbee golf course here. Kinda, like that place, it was empty forever. I could go there any day of the week, on the weekend, and just, be alone. And now, like, you go there on Sunday morning and it's just, everything
Mobbed.
is packed. Yeah. It's just
So
completely
this
mobbed.
is a municipal Frisbee golf course. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's in a local park.
No wonder the Manhattanites want to come live where you are.
Yeah. Yep.
Good day, everyone. I recently had someone come out to bid doing an energy audit on our home, similar to what Rob Delaney spoke about on the Pro Talk podcast. As the inspector was wrapping up, I asked about a blower door test being done before and after the work was completed so the improvement could be measured. Much to my surprise, I was...
Is that Flynn?
Is that Finn? You got to go get him. That's the cutest dog ever.
Yeah, sorry, I hit mute, but a little.
Much to my surprise, I was told they were not doing a blower door test at all. The tech on site said that they wouldn't do a test because based on the age of the house, they could disturb asbestos by sucking it out of the walls. That sounded a little suspicious, so I contacted the estimator who wrote the bid and asked the same question. Why no blower door testing? And the response was, I quote, "You have steam heat, so we can't do a blower door at your home. There was most likely asbestos on the steam pipes. Mind you, our steam pipes are as clean as a whistle, pick attached, and there is most certainly no insulation on them. Is this something you've heard before, or is this just a company I shouldn't trust to come in and air seal our home?" Yes, do not trust them.
Yeah. The Building Performance Institute, they do, like, in their standards, they do specifically say if there's asbestos in the house, you shouldn't do depressurization testing with a blower door. But there is nothing that says you can't do pressurization testing. I know that's not nearly as accurate, but if you're just trying to get rough numbers to see what the improvement is, I don't see why you couldn't do that. I mean, there's a little noise, turning the door backwards if it's windy outside or whatever. But, for a ballpark estimate, I think you'd be fine.
So how are you even doing an audit without pressurizing or depressurizing the house? I mean, what are they going around? What are they air sealing? How do they know what are they doing? Right?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, they're probably just looking for, like, what they can see in terms of missing insulation and stuff like that. But yeah, as far as
That's not an
air
audit.
sealing,
That's just,
yeah.
you have loose insulation.
So, I mean, Jeff, do you have any thoughts on this before I explain my experience with this?
No, not really. I mean, I'm assuming they're just going after the low hanging fruit.
So shortly after the economy tanked, the government instituted the Cash for Cockers program. It was known colloquially, right?
Yeah.
And so a bunch of these companies crawled out of the woodwork. One of them called me up and said, there are a lot of incentives to weatherize your house. We do this kind of work. Would you like us to come out for a free audit? And I said, yeah, sure. I was like, are they going to do a blower door test? Oh, yeah. You know about blower door tests? Yeah, I do, actually. Yeah, they're going to do a blower door test, and we'll have some numbers. And can I set up an appointment? Yeah, sure. So the guy comes out. He looks around the house. He's like, oh, yeah, the windows are okay. Oh, yeah. Oh, the band joists need some sealing. He's like, oh, this house isn't terrible. I wouldn't recommend anything else. And I was like, well, They told me on the phone you were going to do a blower door test. He's like, yeah, we don't need to do that. You know, your house isn't that bad. And
How would you know?
exactly. And I've subsequently done a blower door test, so I know exactly how it performs. And he should have done a blower door test.
Mm-hmm.
So the long story short is that, you know, for like $800 or $900, they would come in and air seal the band joist with some spray foam, fix a couple holes to the outside. One of the thing they did was I had a basement door with a missing lock set. It just had the hole. So they sprayed some foam in there, and they put that on the invoice and went on their way. It took the guy a Saturday morning, and he spent about 3 hours. And I think I paid for $700 or $800, maybe $900, and the federal government paid $16 or $2,000. So this is what you get when you get one of these weatherization companies who are selling quick fixes. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
The easy things to come in and do, you know, they're not really looking at your house as a system. They're looking to score some cash.
Yeah. The reason they don't want to do the blower door is because they don't want you to know that they basically did nothing.
Right. Because then you would have, you know, a test in, test out number, and you could compare the CFM. And if it didn't change, you would know that you just wasted your money.
So,
Yeah.
But theoretically, if they're worried about asbestos, by sealing all these other holes, now they're putting more stress on the areas that are holding this asbestos and are more likely to make it airborne.
I don't know. I mean, so like when you do a blower door test, you don't put it up to full speed, right? You start incrementally and you walk around the house and you make sure things aren't getting blown around. You just don't floor it. You know what I mean? It's because weird things do happen. You can be sucking fiberglass insulation into a room through a disconnected ceiling register, for example, or any number of things. You could be sucking fireplace ashes out of the wood stove, you know. So you don't hit full throttle. You go easy and you check things out, and then once you're reasonably sure it's not going to make a mess, you turn it up.
Because what if it like pulls the furniture across the living room and scratches the floor?
I'm always trying to do that. I can't get that going.
Yeah. But I mean, if you were to start seeing stuff coming through and if it was asbestos, you've already created a problem.
You've created a super fun site.
Yeah. Even if you're running it at a low, you know, running the fan on low and you're only at 25 pascals or whatever.
Yeah. Well, right. Most people don't have like friable asbestos filling cavities. I mean, you might have friable asbestos on steam pipes, as they said, but.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you had vermiculite insulation, you know, that could be another thing that's, you know, getting sucked through any of those openings that you talked about.
Why not the pressurization test, though?
Well, the depressurization test is what they're saying because that, you know,
no, I know,
you're
but so what is the trade-off with pressurizing the house versus depressurizing?
Well, when you flip the door around, this is just my understanding. I don't have a ton of, you know, experience with this stuff. But essentially there's just more noise in the data when you flip it around because of possible interference with wind and stuff like that from outside because of where the sensors are.
Sure, because your reference is not the inside of the house, it's the outside of the house now, which could have varying pressure based on wind speed.
Right.
Okay. Well, I learned something new today, Matt. So this is our official blower door episode. This comes from... Boy, I did a terrible job with this week. I'm sorry. I don't know who this is. Blower doors and their ancillary equipment are expensive. I live in a place where most of the single-family homes are close to 100 years old, and in the winter, I see a lot of ice dams, so I know there are opportunities here. How would you make a pretty good blower door? When I heard Rob Delaney on FHB Pro Talk podcast, he was talking about the great things the DG1000 can do. So he's talking about the Energy Conservatory's new digital manometer, right? And this thing costs $1,000. It seems to me fundamentally that this is something that can be done pretty good with a fan and a piece of plywood. In my town, there are many odd-shaped doors, arches, and many of the shapes are non-standard widths. Mine is 39.5 inches, which make for beautiful houses, but hard to get things that fit. How about a piece of plywood cut to fit the client's window with a bit of foam and an attic fan? I see there are manometers that are on sale for Amazon for under $200. Add in Steve Basic's fog machine, and we can generate some pretty good data. Seems to me that getting the homes tested at all will open eyes to drive demand for air sealing. So that really is our fundamental goal here at the Fine Home Building podcast, is to drive demand for air sealing.
Why not?
Colin, you have talked about this very thing, have you not?
What, making my own blower door?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'll always make something if I can, but I'm just not enough of a science nerd for this one. I'll fit the opening and I'll get it all air sealed, but as soon as we're into manometers, I'm out.
The thing I don't get is, so let's say you get these pressure readings inside and outside. It doesn't tell you anything about the volume of air going through. So if you have this fan, let's say you even, you buy a fan that tells you how much air it's moving through a given aperture or whatever at whatever speed. Like, what does that data get you, really? Like, you need to know how much air is moving at that pressure.
The gauges on a blower door extrapolate the difference in inside and outside pressure, with regard to fan speed, right? And that's how it's measuring how leaky your house is.
Right. The computer knows what's going on there, and you're going to have a really hard time. Like, you'd need more than just a manometer. You'd also need an anemometer or whatever to know what the wind speed is on the backside of that fan, and you'd probably have to measure it in a bunch of different places. But I don't know.
I think this sounds fantastic. I love this idea. I mean, of course, you're not going to get real numbers, but you could point out thermal bypasses, for example, right? You could know if you had a huge hole in your house by running a big enough fan that would indicate with a smoke pencil or fog, whatever, that you got an air leak. A smoking Marlboro is it used to be my preferred way to find air leaks, but I don't do that anymore.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. I mean, I don't think that you could really get accurate, air exchange numbers, air changes per hour or whatever, but you could use it easily to track down leaks walking around with a smoke pencil and seeing, as long as you could get it depressurized enough. I mean, you're not going to do that with a box fan. You
need a big ass fan, right?
Yeah.
You need a fan that moves some CFM. When I started thinking about this, when I was looking at the script here, like one of those floor dryers that you can rent at the home center or buy at the big box store would seem like a good thing. And I'm pretty sure they're variable speed. So, you could use it on the lowest speed to find the biggest holes, and then you could gradually work your way up to find the smaller things, much like you would, a conventional blower door.
Yeah.
So at this point, though, we don't need the manometer on there, right?
Right. You're just using it to move air in great volumes.
Right. So if this guy wants to grow his business because he's seeing opportunity for it, it sounds like he needs the real tool, right? He needs to show up to the job and act the part and have the right equipment. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, so this thing is not made to measure leakiness of homes. A blower door is a thing made to measure the leakiness of homes. So if your job is to measure the leakiness of home, I don't see how you could not have that that device, right? That's your job. That's the job and the tool of a building diagnostician.
Yeah. And it can do the other thing too. And you can also use it to track down leaks. Yeah. So it does everything for you.
But his point is that this is a very expensive piece of kit, right? You're going to spend $2,000 on it. Mm-hmm. And if you're just a DIYer or, an interested remodeler, sure, you could use this to some effect, I bet. And if you're a remodeler, I say buy a blower door and get good clients and convince them that this is something that's important and do it.
Yeah, and charge them for it.
Yeah.
They'll pay it off in no time. Plus,
it's now part of the code. So going forward, they're going to need that service.
You're right, Jeff. That is something that that's right. That's fundamental to this discussion, is that airtightness requirements are now part of the code for years. And if you're building, especially new houses, this is something you have to do. So you might as well get one and do it.
Yeah, you have to do it as long as it's being enforced in your area. It's been part of the code in New York State for, I don't know, since the 2015 code maybe. And only this year are some of the rural parts starting to enforce it. And I'm sure there's plenty of parts of the state where it's still not enforced at all.
I'm sure all over the country,
Yeah.
Somebody was telling me that Maryland, which is very progressive with regard to code adoption, has for a couple cycles held the requirement at 6 air changes, which was meant for the warmer parts of the country that don't have the delta T. And I think even those are going to 3, but nobody wants to do this, and I'm not really sure why. If any of our listeners have insights as to why the enforcement is so spotty with regard to air tightness testing, I'd love to hear why. So Colin, this reminds me, one of your very first whole house video shoots was a passive house that Steve Basic was building on the Cape, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And they were doing envelope blower door testing, and the biggest leakage was around the door itself, right? And you pointed out that when you're talking about these super tight houses, the normal technology is not designed for it.
Oh, it was driving me nuts because they're finding all this leakage. I'm like, yeah, it's around your blower door. So like we ended up taking, I believe it was painter's tape is what we had, and just having to really seal that up. And then we started chasing nail holes at that point.
It's different. It's amazing to me the difference in perspective, right? Like that leaky canvas enclosure that goes around the blower door is fine if you're testing a Victorian at thousands of CFM of air leakage. But when you're talking about a couple hundred or 300 or 400 CFM on a passive house, that's not the right tool for the job.
Right. Yeah. And at this point, there was no even openings cut for windows, right? So the whole building was it was extremely tight.
Did it make your ears pop?
I don't recall.
This is funny. So this is from Kevin. So I got a laugh out of your last podcast, number 275. Our landscaper Max from D'Angelo Landscaping lives around the corner on King Street in Danbury. You all were talking about his rainbow-colored roofs on his home and outbuildings, and you nailed it. He has friends in the trades that collect leftovers until he has enough to do a building. Recently, we had a new shed delivered, and he took our old shed with a flatbed car hauler over to the compound to use for his miniature pony. He's a first-generation, hardworking family man, putting his son through college and hustling every day. You really kept it local for me today. That's awesome to hear, right? If you guys didn't see these photographs, it showed these buildings in this little compound, and they all had these very artfully designed multicolored roofs, and we were speculating, was this some kind of architectural feature, or was he collecting leftover shingles? And there you go.
That's funny.
Did you guys see this?
No.
That was great.
Check it out.
Take a look.
I mean, you can make ugly mismatched shingle roofs, but this really, it was cool. It was really cool. So how long do you think it's going to be before I use my generator? You go first, Jeff.
I think 2 years.
2 years. Okay, Colin.
3 weeks.
3 weeks. Okay. Matt.
We're supposed to have some crazy storms tomorrow, so
I hope they
I don't know
freaking
if they're hitting
come.
you. But yeah, I was thinking about dragging my generator out just in case. I only put it away a few weeks ago.
I haven't finished putting mine away.
Yeah.
Oh God. So we'll, what do you think? $5? I'm going to say never. Absolutely never, ever will I use it.
Yeah. Well, now that you have it, you'll never need it.
Right.
That's the way it works. I mean, you basically paid whatever $1,600 to make sure that your
it's
power
like I'm in it for like
on.
$2,500, man, between the switch gear and the generator. Yeah.
Yep.
I'm all in. It's actually $2,600.
Man.
I quit thinking about it because it made me upset. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks to Matt, Colin, and Jeff for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com, and please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. One other thing, folks, remember to fill out the survey on the podcast page of the Fine Homebuilding website. And please review us on iTunes. You all have been great with my appeal to put up some more reviews. We got a bunch of them, and I'm grateful. That really helps us out. Thanks again, everyone, for listening. Stay safe and happy building.